Shabbat Shalom. Okay, good. I know, Yiratzon is like a lullaby, but that doesn't mean you don't have to go all the way. So, the Torah portion this week, Re'eh, starts with that word, Re'eh, which means see, S-E-E. This day I set before you blessing and curse. And like I said earlier, it's often one of the passages that we rely on to say, see, we have choice in our life, that we have the ability to look out at the world and see what is a blessing and see what is a curse, and to, of course, make the obvious choice to choose the blessing. I looked back this week at some of the work of Abraham Joshua Heschel, the great 20th century rabbi, theologian, social justice advocate. And he looked at this very differently. He looked at good and evil as not obvious choices. He begins an essay on this with the story of a king who received his harvest report. And the report explained that whoever ate the crops would start to lose their mind. But there was a problem because there was no other food available. And so what are you going to do? You're going to choose to eat the food that will cause you to lose your mind, or are you going to choose to starve? And so the king says, the only option we have is to eat the food, and for a few of us to sort of watch out and make sure that you can point out when we're losing our minds. Now, if you follow the logic of the story, there wouldn't be anybody left to figure out who would be able to say who was losing their mind and who wasn't. So why does Heschel open an essay on good and evil with the idea that nobody would be able to know the difference? So often we frame things in terms of right or wrong, black and white, good or bad. But the reality I think Heschel is trying to point out is those sides don't fully exist. And so I think he would read the verse differently. Re'eh anochi notein lifnechem hayom bracha uklala. Re'eh, see before you blessing and curse. See if you can figure out which one is which. And understand that you might not be able to know the difference. Heschel says in the essay, all of history is a sphere where good is mixed with evil. The supreme task of humanity consists in an effort to separate good from evil and evil from good. The rabbis later in the Talmud, they write about this, particularly writing about the sixth day of creation. So it's in the sixth day of creation that we find ourselves showing up in the story. And it's in the sixth day of creation that God says not only is it good, but it's very good. Now, we like to take that as a really good accolade upon our shoulders, that God was very proud to have created human beings. The rabbis had a different idea. They actually thought very good maybe means very bad. So, 3 examples they give. You say it's very good because you say sleep is very good. But is sleep very good? Because when we drink too much, we sleep too much. And so sometimes sleep is a sign of what is very bad. Second rabbi chimes in. He says, perhaps what is good refers to the good desire, the ability to be kind to your neighbor, to do the right thing. But when we say something's very good, it's like we're pursuing something. We have an appetite for something. It's the evil desire, as we say in Hebrew, the Yetzer Hara, the desire that makes us seek things out for ourselves. And he reminds us that if it were not for these desires, no person would build a house, no person would find a spouse, no person would have children, for they would have no desires. So perhaps what is very good is actually what is a little bit selfish within us, but eventually what is selfish within us perhaps leads to something good. So if the first person is saying, what is good for one person, sleep, might be a sign of what is bad for another person, the second rabbi is saying what is bad might actually lead to something that is good. Third rabbi chimes in. Perhaps the verse very good means that it's referring to the angel of death. Well, how could that be? We're in fact talking in the sixth day about the creation of humanity. He tells a story. A king made a meal. There's lots of food in our stories. And invited the guests to put in front of them a tray filled with all the good food. They ate the food and they were so happy, and the king felt he had given them a great gift. And then he found that when someone thanked him, he felt so good about what he had done. But when the people who were there, half of them who didn't thank him, he became angry. And so, as the story says, he had them punished. The rabbi says that this is because sometimes when we do something good, it can also bring out the worst in us, because we feel we're owed something. And so what is good for one person may not be good for the other. What is seemingly bad for us, these urges that we have, may lead us to some of our most beautiful creations and opportunities to give food and shelter and love to others. And sometimes when we do something selfless, it ends up becoming selfish because we feel we're owed something. This is all Heschel's way of reminding us that sometimes we look out and we see something, we say, no, absolutely, that is the right decision. And he says, don't be so sure of yourself. Because in every decision, there is some good, there is some bad. I raise this because, as you know, this week was an election week. A strange election for us, as August elections aren't usually so popular. An election that focused on an issue very dear to our congregation, that our board, in fact, took a stance on, saying that we should vote no on issue 1, which happened to be the way that the state voted overwhelmingly, because Judaism for a long time has believed in reproductive rights, the ability for people to choose when it comes especially to decisions like abortion. And so we took a side. But that doesn't mean that our side is all good and that the other side is all bad. There was another decision this week, one that got a little bit of press in the local paper. It was brought up to me by a parent, and then I looked into it a little further. It was a decision that some of our local schools, including Copley, where my children go, have invited a group called LifeWise Academy, which is a group that teaches Christianity to students, to pull kids from school during the school day. And so many of our school districts, many of them right in our area, there's a whole long list in the Akron Beacon Journal, I think this morning or yesterday, of school districts that we're very familiar with. We'll be allowing parents to decide if they would like their elementary school children to be pulled out of class so that they can have Bible study instead of whatever other academics would be happening at that time. So here you have, on the one hand, we fought this week on issue 1 to say the majority should decide. And in the same week, we're going to say you should take care of the minority. Just because the majority of our students are Christian doesn't mean that Christianity should be the religion that is predominantly in our schools. We would say that. We would say, what about my student? And somebody could say, well, you don't make up 51% of the population. And so I share these two differing positions because I think Re'eh bracha uklala. Can we see where the curse is? Can we see where the blessing is? Are we able to whittle down what is important about issue 1? Not that one group won and another group lost, but what are the parts of that that are the blessing? Perhaps the shared blessing by even both sides. And what are the parts of it that have become selfish? What are the parts of it that have become competitive? What are the parts of it that have become ugly when they don't need to be. And so too, as was explained in the article, the proponents of bringing religion into the schools more directly feel that our children have lost a sense of hope and optimism, a sense of direction and moral values. Perhaps there's some good in that, but perhaps there's also some curses in the ways in which the good will be pursued and hurt others in the process. And so, are we able to see the variety of colors, the levels of good, the levels of blessing, and the levels of challenge and curse, and what some might even say is evil? Are we able to see that they're mixed up with each other at times? I think Re'eh Anochi noten lifnechem hayom bracha uklala, the idea that we are to see blessing and curse. Perhaps this week can mean for us not that we get to have an easy choice, but that we have to look more closely so that we can see through the easy choices, find what it is we have to bring to the surface, speak with those who have differing opinions, and find where the shared blessings are. Because I would imagine we all want hope and optimism and moral values for our kids. And I imagine we all care about life and about choice, about men and women and children. And so how can we find the blessing in the midst of the curses and notice the curses in the midst of the blessing? I hope in the coming months we'll be able to do that. And as Heschel said, as they're intertwined with each other, our most human skill and the call to us for redemption is in fact to figure out how to separate those two from each other, even though they're deeply intertwined. Shabbat Shalom.